What's up, my martial arts fanatics? Welcome back to System Breakdowns. I am super excited to break down one of my favorite fighters of all time. Somebody who, anytime you have any conversations about MMA GOATs, this guy's name comes up for good reason. Demetrius Johnson, aka Mighty Mouse. Spectacular fighter, one of the highest UFC title defense holders of all time. Just reclaimed his title in ONE against Marias. What can you say about this guy? He's super athletic, super technical, has solutions for everything, and he's fought the best of the best. Everybody from Rod Tang to Henry Cejudo. Just a spectacular martial artist, and it was really a pleasure to be able to go back, rewatch all his fights, get into the weeds on this stuff, and break down the systems that have made this possible. So I'm excited to share this with you. So stay tuned, and let's start breaking down Mighty Mouse. So let's start breaking down what makes Mighty Mouse's striking so successful, because it's very hard to catch this guy. And a lot of this is the ability to work from an outside range, create a constant threat where he only commits on his terms, and then the constant threat of a takedown or a clinch that forces guys to back up a lot, so that in the beginning of the fight he works a lot more outside position, and as the fight progresses on, you start feeling him pressure guys back a lot more. Let's talk about how this works. From the outside in the beginning, you can see a lot of probing, but either foot forward, very similar to what you see out of like the TJ Dillashaws and Dominic Cruzes. Those lighter guys like to do this a lot, the light footwork, because they can kind of move, and he kind of seems to do it even better than everybody else. Very light footwork, quick probing. One of the advantages to a lot of stance switching is it allows you to start chasing angles. It makes it hard to leg kick a guy who's constantly changing. And for him, his upper and his lower body, like a lot of really adept strikers, are disconnected. So he can come in with this jab, he can come in with the cross, he can come with the jab, he can come with the cross. You see what I'm saying? It doesn't matter which foot is forward for him to throw his attack. So he's just thinking about getting to an angle and throwing the right shot based on where he feels like he is. What's nice about this is as he enters in, because he enters in with high hands, this gives him an opportunity to disengage at any point. He has an intercepting motion where if they start to throw hands down back at him, if they start to counter, he has something to intercept and he can just pull back and disengage. This is a tactic that works really well for him. If they do start to chase him back, he'll start putting some front kicks down range occasionally, and it's similar to what Sugar Sean does, where when you get guys who retreat a lot, that front kick is a nice tool to frustrate guys as they walk in to stuff their motion. This is to keep him from constantly backpedaling. So he wants to backpedal out of range on his terms, but he doesn't want to be constantly running, if that makes sense. If they do start to put a lot of that pressure on him, he's going to use that though. Now, if he does get backed up to the wall, you're going to see him frame and roll out and reset, right? Very common tactic. But also, if you push him back too much and you start to overcommit, don't be surprised if he comes underneath and shoots, or if he uses this to get to a clinch and he starts attacking knees and stuff like that. That clinch and those knee strikes are lethal. We'll talk about that soon though. But that's a real threat. So it causes guys to not push him back too much. It's hard to chase him. When you do chase him, his hands are up, he's defending, he's catching with front kicks, and there's always the risk of the reactive shot or running into a punch. I was going to talk about this later, but I might as well mention it now. One of the great things about this retreating style is that when you start to chase on this, it's easy for him to make guys miss. It tires them out, and more importantly, it gives him countering opportunities. So as he's backing up, as guys are trying to headhunt on him, they're throwing to try to get to him. He gets just out of range. And what's nice is for him to re-engage in range, he covers that gap a lot slower because they're moving towards him. So you have two people moving in this direction. This guy whiffs, and then now suddenly this guy comes back. It allows him to close that gap. It's very deceptive. So he moves back, he makes the miss, and then he comes back in with very quick, agile shots. That's hard for them to defend because they're committed forward. So that's the majority of his kind of like defensive movement. Then what he's going to do is he starts probing in with his top hand, starts throwing some techniques, some punches down the lane. He likes to enter with a lot of jabs, quick jab and get out, right? Quick jab and break off at an angle. A lot of this type of stuff. Then he'll start putting a cross down the lane. Then he'll start putting it together. Then he starts throwing stuff like, pop, throwing that jab and punctuating with a big left hook. This is something he does a lot. He'll throw a jab cross, big left hook. Throw a cross, big left hook. Enter with the jab, step to a big left hook. That technique, it's a very like Joe Frazier kind of chasing technique. And this works really well when guys start to try to backpedal as he enters. So he enters in, try to catch that jab, they moves out of range, no problem. He drops his head, throws that hook, disengages, and resets. Then from there, probably one of his most common attacks is the roundhouse kick. He puts it underneath these hands a lot of times. So he'll start off top hand position, catch that roundhouse kick from the outside. Throw a jab, throw a roundhouse kick from the outside. Moving the outside, the top hand position, uses the principle projected intention, gets their hands up, thinking about that, and he comes underneath, catches them clean. Once he's set a pattern for that, then he starts level chaining. He starts attacking the legs, or here, catch that hedge kick, catch the head kick, move back out, disengage, okay? Then from there, what he's starting to do is set the stage so that now he can blitz on them and cover ground. He set a pattern, disengage, re-engage, causing a little bit of static motion now so that they start staying still, trying to figure out the countering game. This is his time to really blitz on them, drive them back. What he's looking for is for guys to do this and retreat out. A common strategy, particularly in MMA, is when you start attacking with stuff, guys start moving back. He's looking for this because he's going to use this to enter in and try to shoot. He's going to go hands to just below the hips. If he can hit the double leg, he'll hit the double leg. If he can't, he's going to start looking for a clinch position. And in the next section, we're going to come back and talk about what he does off of that. But this is why I'm saying he's creating a pressure. As he enters in, if he's constantly threatening a clinch, whether they're static or they're disengaging, early on, it's a lot of opportunism and get out. Then it's constantly engaging, and he uses the clinch as an exit strategy. He completes all his combinations by coming low, hands on the hips, hands on the thighs, trying to get whatever he can and just threaten. If he can get a takedown there, he'll do it. A lot of times, guys will move back to the cage, and he's more than content to finish it there. This effect causes guys to start retreating back a lot because they're afraid of that. So as the fight progresses on, instead of disengaging, now he starts pressuring forward and constantly finishing his combinations with a clinch. Then one of the things that he's going to do if the guy is not backing up and he starts staying static and he ends up in a lot of static exchanges where he's not chasing or retreating, then you're going to start to see him use a lot of trapping to a cross. He already enters in with top hand position. He's going to get his hand on top, pop, clear a lane for a cross. He does this on both sides, pop, hit that, and then he starts dropping to his clinch off of that. Now once he enters in with the clinch, he does all this really great aggressive pace, gets to a clinch. Like I said, he tends to enter with his hands right around hip level. If he can get to a double leg, he'll gladly go for it. But sometimes he knows that as you go for it, a common response is for guys to start to underhook. So as he comes up to hands on the hips, he's going to start looking to start to control from the outside. You're going to start to see him get a wrist control and get to an underhook. This is usually his modus operandi, but he is also content to get overhook control and start throwing these knees to the body from here. But ideally, he's going to try to get to an underhook and a wrist control. He'll do it on either side. He's more than content. Once he gets this, he's clearing the lane for quick knees to the body or pulling them down to quick knees to the head. But usually before he goes to the head, what he likes to do is switch to a collar tie. Then from here, he's going for the plum clinch, and he's going to start railing knees to the body, railing big knees to the head, pulling them down, bam! And he is lethal with these. This guy's knees are so powerful. It's one of his most devastating weapons, and it's how he's beaten guys who have vastly out-wrestled him. In the Henry Cejudo fight, great example of that. He comes in, he gets to this position, and he starts throwing knees on him, getting to outside control, throwing knees to the body, starting to come up to the head. He's done this in a lot of his fights, though. And like I said, he does this both offensively and defensively against the cage. As he gets in these scrambles, he'll get to an underhook and a wrist control, and then he starts fighting, coming up here to a collar tie, coming to his plum clinch, pop, starting to hit the knees of the body and the head. Or he'll start to turn them to the side, pop, pop. Very devastating with this clinch position. His access to it is great. It's a slow climb as opposed to just like in the middle of a scramble trying to go for it. He starts with his blitz. He comes in. He moves the guy back. He climbs. Pop, pop. This threat will often give him the takedown now. This is where he gets slick. Islam Makhachev is really good at this. Striking to open up the hips for a takedown. Shooting the takedown to move the hips forward for the striking. Or move the hips back for a striking. So he comes in here to shoot. They start going hips back. And as their hips come back, they open themselves up for knee strikes. If they start to defend the knee strike by coming hips forward, he switches to the double leg and he completes that and takes them down. Once again, he does this both putting guys up against the cage or when he is shooting in the middle of the ring. When he's backed against the cage, he does very similar. Underhook, wrist control, start to turn them, get these knees, and then start to turn them back to the cage. In the cases where he's actually gotten stuck, he's done some really cool stuff from here. One of my favorite things that he's done is, while his back is pinned to the cage, he gets his hands on top for a plum clinch, and then he raises himself up by pulling himself up into a butterfly guard, knowing that this guy is going to keep him pinned up. He's not going to just let him off the cage, right? So he pulls himself up to a butterfly guard and starts elbowing him in the side of the head from here. Gets lowered back down, starts to try to go for it again, realizes he's still pinned, does the same thing. Inserts his butterfly hooks against the cage, climbs himself up, uses it to elevate himself, pop, and just starts knocking this guy's head. It's one of the coolest things I've seen as a cage defense, and I really enjoyed it. But generally speaking, he's more than content to just, like I said, work to an underhook, or even if he has an overhook here and he has this outside position, he just focuses on getting this down and start throwing these knees right to this lower section, causing the hips to go back. This is either going to give him his plum clinch or it's going to give him his double leg access. Very effective strategies. Okay, so let's get into wrestling defense. We've already established offensively, it's that combination of the clinch and the double leg that he's going to go to, or the single leg. You know, he comes in here going for the clinch, hitting the single, bounce back and forth until he gets him down or he does damage with the knees. Wrestling defense. He obviously is going against some of the best wrestlers in the world. He's had to establish some pretty good wrestling defense. So a couple things he does. Most common defense that he does is the same one that everybody does against a single leg. You frame down the head and you limp your leg out. Guys at the highest level do this. He will often add the spin to it to try to kick that out. And in some cases, he'll do it to the point where if he can, he's going to get this here and he's going to kick this out, spin, and come around and take the back, which is really cool. A lot of his takedown defense involves just framing down the head. That's kind of his first response. If he's like, it's one of those things like, if you're not sure what else to do, affect head posture. You know what I mean? Like it's an easy way of trying to keep them below his knees and start working out from any type of a takedown. If they go for a double leg, what he tends to do, very aggressive whizzer, and then I'm going to lower myself to do a little bit because I'm not 135 or 125, I'm 215 and my knee's bugging me. But he's going to come into this whizzer here, real aggressive, and then what he's going to do is go flat hips to the ground and just really drive that shoulder down with a very aggressive whizzer. He does this also in his jiu-jitsu, and this is a principle that I'll use as well. When guys are trying to elevate you and you're riding the top, instead of letting them butterfly hook you and kick you over so they can come on top, when they kick you over, you focus on keeping your hips flat so that you ride the wave and you just surf flat and then you come back in. This is something he is very good at. He does it from a lot of positions. If he has an overhook, you will frequently see him do this surfing and then drive the head down with the aggressive whizzer. That's pretty standard practice, but I think what it is his fight IQ at recognizing which of the two is coming in. If he feels them going for the single leg, it's a quick response, and if he feels them going for the double leg, he's using kind of the same motion where left hand pushes down, left hand comes down and over. That's really it. And depending on what they're doing, as he feels the double leg, he just turns with it. As he does the single leg, he turns with it. Similar motions, minor adjustments based on what he's getting. Now, if they do happen to get him to the ground and they start to attack the legs, particularly against the cage, very simple thing. He's going to push down to the head and he's going to start to get his knees free and get back up. If he can't and they're really staying on top of the knees, you'll see a lot of getting to the far side arm. So if he'll keep the head down, come over to the far side arm and start to kind of scoot in and just slowly work his way out and try to get to like a bandolier position. This is something else that he does really, really well. from a takedown defense, when he starts pushing down the head and they start coming back up, you'll start see him threatening with some striking. If they come up high enough, he'll threaten with the plum clinch to the knees and do a lot of tie clinches of defense. But sometimes he'll also use this, and as he's pushing down the head, if they're coming back up, he's going to come over here to that north-south position, that control position, what we think of as that bandolier position here, where he has Darce options, Anaconda options, guillotine options. But really, his favorite option, you don't ever really see him going for those. Instead, he just keeps top control, and as they come up, then it's knees for days, buddy. I think it was John Dodson that he did that too, that he got him controlled in that north-south position. And he put his hand on the ground so he couldn't knee him in the face. So every time his hand came up, it was knees to the face. Every time his hand came down, he switched knees to the body, and he just kept him here. And he threw like 25 of these knees at him. It was brutal. So that also kind of ties in with his takedown defense and his cage defense. So I kind of want to throw it in at the end. But that's something you will see him go for a lot, where he starts to go for a tie clinch, uses that to snap down, get to this position, and then attacking from there, breaking them down to the ground, circling so he can start working his jiu-jitsu as well. Okay, so when Mighty Mouse ends up on the ground and he ends up in a side control bottom, look, when you're that weight class, you have a lot of scrambles. Sometimes this happens. One of the things he does really well is he's just patient. He's going to keep them tight, keep the posture controlled, keep them from striking, start getting his elbows in, and he's not going to rush. He's not in a hurry. What he's going to do is wait for them to make a mistake. And as they do so and they start moving around, he just is going to try to get a foot inside and start getting back to his butterfly guard. Anytime he's in trouble, this is a common response of his. Also, when he's on the ground here, and these guys start coming in here and they start breaking his legs down and stuff like that, very common for him to get back to his butterfly guard. Look, these guys have short legs, so it's very easy for him to insert in there. Then what you're going to see a lot of is keeping that head posture control, and you're going to start seeing him put foot on the hips, kick him off, and stand up. And he will do this from a lot of positions whenever he ends up on bottom. Let's go into passing now. What happens a lot of times is as soon as he takes guys down, he'll pull his double leg, and he ends up on top of their legs. And what he does, I think, is really important, that he takes a second and he lets them burn out their scramble for a minute. And he cooks them for a second, and then once they've kind of burned it off, then he progresses on. Especially in this weight class where guys pop back up, because all these wrestlers are so small, they just pop right back up. When he does take guys down, it's important to establish control for a second. He pinches the hips, keeps on top of the legs. A lot of times these guys will get to the butterfly hooks and stuff like that. And he's just going to keep them here and ride the wave for a little bit. And then, once they've settled down, then he's going to start to progress. Most of the time, his favorite way of passing is to take a landmark at half guard. He'll do this from closed guard too. He'll start in closed guard, step over a foot, and get to half guard, where he's going to do the majority of his passing. I'm a big half guard player too. I'm a big fan of it because it's a nice transition spot whether you're passing. It's easy to end up here a lot. It's easy to put yourself here if you lose position. So it becomes a nice segue point that I think is important to establish a good game on. And he is very good at understanding what it takes to pass on half guard and be successful from his striking. A lot of times what you'll see him do is he'll start by controlling this far side arm. A common practice in half guard is to start doing like a crossface and stuff. But he knows that ultimately he wants to get to a crucifix. So a lot of times he's going to start getting over this shoulder and flattening out a little bit. And then he's going to start getting in here. And he likes to control this leg and this arm. Because in half guard, what he doesn't want to have happen is them working to a side a lot where they start getting underhooks and stuff like that. So he's going to flatten them out, get this control, and then he's going to start getting his arm in here and keeping them flat. This is going to start making it easy for him to pass over this other leg with all of his weight on it. All he has to do is circle his foot out, pin, and get his knee to the inside. And now he can start to establish his side control. And once again, his side control game, because he likes the crucifix a lot, he's going to get real heavy here and just focus on controlling his hips and keeping them from turning away. Nice tight control with his elbows and starting to get heavy on this arm so we can start pinning it down and start working with the crucifix. What will happen sometimes is if these guys start getting underhooks and stuff like that, you'll see him start transitioning to things like knees to the body from here, and he hits them hard. But most of the time, this is pretty easy for him to establish a control. And if worse comes to worse, he goes back to half guard, resets, and then goes back to his passing again. Because he's so consistent with passing, it's very easy for him to do. If he can't pass to that side, you will on occasion see him pass to the 3/4 mount, where if he starts to get in here and he doesn't feel like he can get it, you will occasionally see him sliding to the other side and going to the 3/4 mount and using this to pass them out. Most of the time, though, he's going to come here to this side and start to work to the side control. From here, he's going to start getting his knee on the other side of here and start getting on top of this arm, pinning this arm down, and then that's all she wrote, right? Very similar to what you see out of Shevchenko. I feel like the crucifix position in MMA is arguably one of the most important positions you can get to. If you can get to that, I think if you get to side control, you should be trying to establish a crucifix. I think it's such a dangerous position. There's so little they can do, and there's so much you can do. If he feels like this is not happening, though, that's when you start to see him posture up a little bit, and he starts throwing strikes and bringing his knee across, throwing bombs. And what he's doing is he's distracting them by hiding his knee. He starts off in side control, throwing bombs, and as they start to bring their hands up, then he starts to bring his knee across. He's hiding the knee on belly. And then when he slides over to mount, these guys are so concerned with defending here that he's throwing bombs, and now the armbar becomes super available because it's that classic, like, day one jiu-jitsu. They put their hands up, and then next thing you know, you're ripping their arm off. And he's very good at hitting this. So, once again, he starts off in this side control, trying to get the crucifix. It doesn't happen. So what does he start doing? He starts punching. They start guarding. He slides the knee up. He throws bombs. He slides this across. And then next thing you know, as this hand comes up, he starts sliding and really ripping off that arm. Once he's here, they're pretty screwed, to be totally honest. He gets that deep because he sets it up. And then, of course, sometimes you'll get turn away. Common habit from here, guys start to turn away, in which case, well, of course, he's going to take the back and finish them as any Matt Hume brown belt would. That's essentially the majority of his passing system. One of the things that I really enjoy about all of his jiu-jitsu is it's very focused on get to a good pass to a top position, threaten striking for both positional changes and for submission. So while they're busy thinking about striking, he's using this to slowly establish a better position while they're defending this. He's advancing, and then next thing you know, he's in here completing it. And it makes it a very dangerous jiu-jitsu game. The other thing I want to mention briefly is submission defense. He's just patient. He's one of those guys who's hard to finish submissions on. You can get him in a deep guillotine and stuff like that. It's just hard to finish on him because he's patient and will work his way out of very bad positions. You know, Dominic Cruz had him flattened out on his back, choking the shit out of him. And he just took his time and worked his way out. Like, there's something about guys at the highest level, like Volkanovski and Mighty Mouse, that, you know, they're good at, I hate to use the term micro adjustments, they're good at creating just enough space to keep themselves safe, and then letting these guys burn out their arms, and then using that once they create some space to get to a scramble and escape. You know, very high-level jiu-jitsu. So as you can see, this systematic approach allows him to be successful pretty much everywhere. You know, if he gets a good striker, he'll just take him down. If he gets a good wrestler, then he'll use that to get to his clinch and start throwing those nasty knees that he has. But it's an amazing system that allows him to be successful everywhere, and particularly on the ground. He has a very consistent passing method that gets him to a dominant position, and he just tears guys up. But if you enjoyed this, and I hope you did, make sure you share with your friends. Make sure that you watch my other content as well with the other system breakdowns, and I hope you enjoy them. Thanks, guys.